The governments and the cartels seem like they're enemies, right? They've technically been in a war, but I've been seeing more and more evidence that they're more connected and more friendly than we've been led to believe. The banks, corporations, and ruling class families all seem to have their hands in the drug trade too. And there's actually a lot of documented evidence showing these connections.
Although the articles drew criticism by several major newspapers, they raised a firestorm of outrage and prompted official inquiries. The newspaper asserted that members of the CIA's army in Nicaragua helped spark a crack cocaine explosion in urban America in the 1980s. The report said two Nicaraguans, Danilo Blandon and Norwin Meneses, sold tons of cocaine to Los Angeles drug dealer Ricky Ross. The article said Blandon and Meneses funneled millions of dollars in profits to CIA-backed rebels fighting the leftist Sandinista government in Nicaragua. The articles showed no direct link to the CIA, but did include a photograph of Meneses on the right with Adolfo Calero in the center, a leader in the CIA-funded rebel army known as the Contras.
Much of the information in the articles is not new. Allegations of Contra drug connections have been the subject of congressional probes, news stories, and books. What is new is the link the article suggests between the wholesalers and the retailers, between men said to be associated with the CIA-backed Contras and sales of crack cocaine on the streets. The series was written by reporter Gary Webb.
Did the CIA put drugs into the black community?
We don't have any evidence so far that they did it directly. And what we have evidence of is that men working for a CIA-run army did do that.
With the knowledge of the CIA?
That's the part we don't know. That's the part we don't know. I mean, what we know is that these guys were working for a CIA army. They were meeting with CIA agents before and during the time they were doing this. What happens from there is sort of where we ran into the wall of national security.
Welcome to the channel. I'm your host, BitBoy, and today we're going to get deep. If you want your political, financial, and historical IQs to increase, then watch this entire video. The US government declared a war on drugs before most of us were even born. And after all this time, it seems like the drugs are winning. Addiction's worse than ever, and all of us know someone that was taken way too early because of their relationship with drugs. I know way too many people for sure. I would say that a lot of this has to do with the fact that a lot of people are stressed and depressed. Life is hard. We're living through very difficult times. And when people feel like they have a hole in their life, they will many times try to fulfill themselves with substances. But that's a whole other topic for another video. Today, we're going to talk about how the drugs are still physically getting onto the streets, despite the fact that our government spends billions of dollars to allegedly stop the flow of drugs. I say allegedly because in a lot of my research, I've found various cartels from around the world are closely connected to the web of the corruption that I'm covering in this video series. From the governments to the banks and corporations, well, they're all in bed with the cartels. It's just another one of those things that seems weird when you first hear it. Like, why would the government be working with cartels after declaring war on them? With the banks and corporations, it makes sense that they're trying to get their bag. But what are the government's motivations? It seems mysterious. For the most part, it comes down to the bag for them too. It's a massive revenue stream. And there's a lot of documented history to show that the government is not above dealing drugs to get extra spending cash for their expenditures. Sometimes they don't even hide it that well. The case of Rick Ross in the 1980s brought mainstream attention to the dark alliance between the international drug trade and the US government. No, not that Rick Ross. The original Freeway Ricky Ross, a drug dealer that worked in Los Angeles. Actually, a few years ago, when Ricky Ross finally got out of jail and saw that some rapper with no street cred was using his name, he actually tried to sue him, but lost in court. Anyway, his story's crazy. Between 1982 and 1989, he sold roughly $1 billion worth of cocaine and had no clue that he was part of a CIA operation the entire time. As he hustled his way up the ladder, he started doing business with a Nicaraguan cocaine trafficker named Danilo Blandon. Blandon was allied with the US government at the time because the CIA, under the Reagan administration, a famous actor as a president, wanted to fund a rebel group in Nicaragua called the Contras because the socialist Sandinista government there wasn't playing ball with the US corporation. So they basically allowed Blandon and other drug traffickers from the region to import as much cocaine as they wanted in the middle of the crack epidemic, so they could fund the overthrow of an uncooperative government. They were doing things this way because of something called the Boland Amendment, which banned the government from helping these militant groups. it's an important part of all this. You see, it's not that the government needs more money. They can usually just print or tax their way to whatever they want, but all of that money is on the books, and most of it usually needs to be accounted for. With drug money, there is no public paper trail, so they can do whatever they want with that money, even if it's unpopular with the public, or for God's sake, even illegal. In Los Angeles, Freeway Ricky Ross was at the top of the food chain, but there were more powerful forces above him that he wasn't aware of until it was too late. When crack really started destroying families across the country, the government was actually forced to do something. So they started cracking down on all the dealers. Blandone became a witness and set Ross up, and there were probably similar stories that happened with other people in the supply chain. But this story is the most famous. Ross was supposed to spend his entire life in prison, but after more information about the CIA's involvement came to light over the years, he was able to get another chance at freedom and was eventually released in 2009. This story was uncovered by a journalist named Gary Webb. He published a series of articles called Dark Alliance in August of 1996, where he documented how key figures among the rebels in Nicaragua, including Blandone, smuggled drugs into the U.S. with the knowledge and approval of the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA. It was one of the first news articles posted on the internet in world history, and it was the first to go mega viral. His article set off a massive controversy, and he faced a ton of scrutiny from the government. The rest of the media turned on him too, but he had a ton of support from the public. Sadly, after years of fighting for the truth, he was mysteriously killed in a shooting that was ruled to be a suicide. This situation is just one case where these worlds have overlapped. Just a few years back, the U.S. government was caught shipping a ton of guns to the Mexican cartel in an operation called Fast and Furious. Who names these things? Vin Diesel? The idea was apparently to send the guns to the cartel in hopes that they would be resold into the U.S., allowing the feds to track cross-border arms sales. That's not how things ended up working out, though. Many of these firearms ended up in the hands of Mexican drug cartels, including weapons used in the violent crimes and the murder of U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry in 2010. The ties between the U.S. government and these cartels go very, very, very deep. Last year, it was discovered that one of the main partners of the CIA and FBI in Mexico was working with El Chapo and the Sinaloa cartel for years. His name was Genaro Garcia Luna, and he was working with the intelligence agency in Mexico when his association with El Chapo was discovered. He's going to jail now, but for a while there, he had enough support from the U.S. government that he was getting taxpayer money to buy weapons and other equipment. And these transfers were actually on the books since he had a legitimate public-facing job at the time. The money was supposed to be used to fight against the cartels, but he was working with them all along. It's like something from a movie. It probably goes much deeper than this even, but this is just what we can say for sure from reading the news that has came out since it happened. You see, the banks play an important role too in all this because they knowingly launder money for cartels. They get caught all the time, but they never actually face major consequences. They just pay a fine that's already built into their budget and continue with business as usual. Back before Wells Fargo bought Wachovia, the bank was caught laundering over $378 million for the cartels. Wachovia, remember? It's not just the banks in the US, European banks get in on the fun too. Just a few years ago, HSBC, the biggest bank in Europe, was caught laundering $881 million for cartels. US politicians on both sides of the aisle have had some strange ties to the drug trade over the years, from Bill Clinton to Mitch McConnell, which is funny because both of them have a long history of supporting harsh drug laws. A few years ago, a cargo ship owned by Mitch McConnell's wife was seized by authorities in Colombia, who found 90 pounds of cocaine on board. Instead of fighting back against the story, Mitch has just been treating it like a joke. During his last campaign, he made over $70,000 selling t-shirts that said, "Cocaine Mitch." This is a bipartisan thing too. When Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas, a lot of cocaine was being shipped through an airfield in a town there called Mena. Most of the drugs were being moved by a pilot named Barry Seal, who was mysteriously killed after he got caught and became a witness for the DEA. Clinton, no, I won't get too deep into this now, but that's another rabbit hole for you to jump down into. This was also closely tied to the CIA's proxy wars in South America during the Reagan administration.
Sir, the Republicans are trying to blame you for the existence of a small air base at Mena, Arkansas. This base was set up by George Bush and Oliver North and the CIA to help the Iran-Contras, and they brought in plane load after plane load of cocaine there for sale in the United States, and then they took the money and bought weapons and took them back to the Contras, all of which was illegal, as you know, under the Bolin Act. But tell me, did they tell you that this had to be in existence because of national security?
Well, let me answer the question. No, they didn't tell me anything about it. They didn't say anything to me about it. The airport in question and all the events in question were the subject of state and federal inquiries. It was primarily a matter for federal jurisdiction. The state really had next to nothing to do with it. The local prosecutor did conduct an investigation based on what was within the jurisdiction of state law. The rest of it was under jurisdiction of the United States attorneys who were appointed successively by previous administrations. We had nothing, zero, to do with it, and everybody who's ever looked into it knows that.
While Clinton was in office, there was also a massive scandal because his brother Roger Clinton was hit with federal drug charges and was accused of working with Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel. He was charged with several other investment bankers from Arkansas, one of which, Dan Lasater, was a big financial supporter of the Clintons. In exchange, Lasater got a lot of government contracts for his business. One of these contracts was worth $30 million. But Clinton later denied approving the deal. Who knew? His brother and the bankers pled guilty to cocaine trafficking and spent time in prison. It's hard to believe that Clinton had no clue what was going on and wasn't directly benefiting from it. Maybe his brother took the fall for him. Who knows? These are the kind of things that have been discussed and written about for years, but a lot of it is just speculation. There's actually a lot of people who think that the Netflix show Ozark is loosely based on the Clintons too. Very interesting. That's all I got. Be blessed. BitBoy out.